A user needs to access their system report but wants a shortcut instead of navigating system settings. What should they do? Select one answer. A. Use Siri. B. Hold Option and select Apple menu, System Information. C. Search for About in Spotlight. D. Restart the Mac and press Command R. Correct answer B. Hold Option and select Apple menu, System Information. Let's explain. This option is the correct answer because holding the Option key while clicking the Apple menu reveals an otherwise hidden direct shortcut to system information. It's the fastest way to access the detailed system report without needing to navigate through the standard system settings interface. While using Siri might seem helpful, it doesn't qualify as a true keyboard shortcut and may not consistently provide direct access to the system report. Searching for About in Spotlight is another possible method, but it's slower and may not directly open the full system report view, just the basic About This Mac window. Restarting the Mac and pressing Command R is entirely unrelated to viewing system information. That action boots the system into recovery mode, which is primarily used for reinstalling macOS or accessing disk utility, not for accessing system reports. So the most efficient and direct method is to use the Option key with the Apple menu to reveal system information. A student wants to back up coursework and move it to another Mac as a single file. Which disk utility feature should they use? Select one answer. A. Erase Assistant. B. Create a disk image. C. Partition the drive. D. Run First Aid. Correct answer. B. Create a disk image. Now let's see. Creating a disk image is the ideal method when a student wants to consolidate coursework into a single transferable file. Disk images can be easily moved between Macs and opened like a virtual drive, preserving the file structure and contents exactly as they were. On the other hand, Erase Assistant is designed for securely wiping a Mac before disposal or reinstallation, and it doesn't support backup or transfer tasks. Partitioning the drive is used to divide a physical disk into multiple sections for separate use, such as running multiple operating systems. However, it's not intended for moving files between devices. Lastly, Run First Aid is useful for checking and repairing disk errors, but it doesn't help in creating backups or transferring files. Therefore, for backing up coursework into one file for transfer, creating a disk image is the most efficient and appropriate solution. A company needs to register an application for all users on a Mac using a license file. Where should the property list be placed? Select one answer. A. Users Downloads folder. B. Users Library Preferences folder. C. Root Library Preferences directory. D. Desktop. Correct answer, C. Root Library directory. Now let's explain. The Root Library Preferences directory is the appropriate location for storing a license file when the goal is to register an application for all users on a Mac. This directory is shared across all user accounts, which makes it ideal for global settings and license keys that need to apply system-wide. Conversely, placing the file in the user's Downloads folder is not a viable solution. That folder is meant for temporary downloads and does not serve any configuration or application registration purposes. Similarly, the User's Library Preferences folder only applies settings to the currently logged in user. So if you place the license file there, other users on the Mac would not be covered. Finally, storing a license file on the desktop is not appropriate either, as it lacks the necessary system-level integration and is not a secure or persistent storage location for application preferences. So, for ensuring that all users on the Mac are registered with the same license file, the Root Library Preferences directory is the most effective and proper location. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. Users must sign in with an Apple ID to access the Settings app. False. The VPN and device management section displays profiles installed on the device. True. If a device isn't enrolled in Jamf Pro, the Settings app may show an option to sign in to a work or school account. True, admins cannot restrict the ability to change the device name in the Settings app. False. Now let's explain. First, users do not need to sign in with an Apple ID to access the Settings app. They can browse and adjust most settings freely, although some features like iCloud and App Store do require signing in. Next, the VPN and device management section does show profiles that are installed on the device. This is useful for verifying MDM settings or VPN configurations applied through Jamf Pro or other management tools. Furthermore, if the device is not already enrolled in Jamf Pro or another MDM, the system might display a prompt to sign in with a managed Apple ID. This supports account-driven enrollment, often used in education or enterprise deployments. Lastly, the idea that admins cannot restrict device name changes is false. Through Jamf Pro configuration profiles, admins can lock down that setting, preventing users from renaming the device. Each explanation reinforces how device management and user experience are balanced in macOS environments, especially within managed settings. An organization wants to ensure that lost or stolen devices can be located. An employee, however, is unable to access Find My iPad. What is the most likely cause? Select one answer. A, the feature is only available when signed in with an Apple ID. B, the feature must be enabled in Jamf Pro before it works. C, the feature requires a passcode to be set. D, the VPN and device management setting must be disabled. Correct answer, A, the feature is only available when signed in with an Apple ID. Now let's explain. The Find My feature on Apple devices is fundamentally tied to an Apple ID. This means the device must be signed in with a valid Apple ID for the location tracking and activation lock to function. Without this login, the feature simply cannot operate, regardless of other settings. While Jamf Pro can impose restrictions on Find My, it is not a prerequisite for enabling it. The feature is governed primarily by the Apple ID Association, not MDM enrollment. Next, requiring a passcode is not necessary for using Find My. Although setting a passcode is a good security measure, it has no bearing on whether the feature works. Lastly, VPN or device management settings do not interfere with the functionality of Find My. Those configurations are unrelated and do not prevent access to the feature. So when troubleshooting why Find My iPad is unavailable, the first and most likely issue is the absence of an Apple ID login on the device. An administrator is reviewing an APFS container on a school Mac running macOS 12. They see multiple volumes, including a VM volume. What is the function of this VM volume? Select one answer. A, stores macOS installation files. B, stores app data. C, holds swap files for macOS. D, saves user preferences and login items. Correct answer, C, holds swap files for macOS. Now let's explain. The VM volume is specifically used for storing encrypted swap files that macOS uses during virtual memory operations. These swap files support system performance when the physical RAM is full, helping macOS manage multitasking and memory-intensive processes. On the other hand, macOS installation files are part of the system volume, not the VM volume. This ensures a clean separation between the operating system and temporary system operations like memory swapping. App data, meanwhile, resides on the data volume, where user and application files are typically stored. And finally, user preferences and login items are also saved within individual user folders inside the data volume, not within the VM volume. So, among the multiple volumes in an APFS container, the VM volume serves the critical purpose of supporting macOS virtual memory by holding swap files. On devices running iOS, iPadOS, or visionOS, how is storage structured using APFS? Select two answers. A, system volume. B, data volume. C, VM volume. D, external mount volume. Correct answers. A, system volume. B, data volume. Now let's explain. The APFS storage structure for iOS, iPadOS, and visionOS devices is divided primarily into two volumes. The system volume holds the operating system and all system critical files. This volume is sealed to protect the integrity of the OS and prevent unauthorized changes. At the same time, the data volume is used to store user-specific content, including apps, app data, documents, and other user-generated files. This separation allows for more secure updates and easier device management. On the other hand, the VM volume is only used on macOS to handle virtual memory and is not present on mobile platforms like iOS or iPadOS. Lastly, the external mount volume refers to mounted external drives, which are not a standard or built-in part of the default mobile storage structure. So in summary, system volume and data volume are the correct components of APFS storage on mobile Apple devices. What does Apple use to encrypt iCloud data before uploading in most cases? Select one answer. A, manual passcodes. B, device-generated iCloud keys. C, public FTP encryption. D. Touch ID? Correct answer, B. Device-generated iCloud keys. Now let's explain. Apple uses device-generated iCloud keys to encrypt user data before it is uploaded to iCloud. These encryption keys are securely created on the device itself, ensuring that only the user's hardware and credentials can decrypt the data, which strengthens privacy and security. Manual passcodes, while important for unlocking devices, do not handle encryption of iCloud content. Their role is mainly for user authentication, not data protection during transfer. Public FTP encryption is entirely unrelated, as iCloud does not use FTP protocols. Instead, it relies on secure Apple-managed protocols with end-to-end encryption in some services. Touch ID is another misdirection. It's designed for biometric authentication locally on the device and has no role in encrypting or transferring cloud data. So in most cases, iCloud data is protected before upload using encryption keys generated directly by the user's device, ensuring that data remains secure both in transit and at rest. When enrolling a device with account-driven enrollment in Jamf Pro, what menu option typically appears in Settings? Select one answer. A. Sign in to work or school account. B. Enable parental control. C. Register with Apple Business Manager. D. Set up screen time. Correct answer, A. Sign in to work or school account. Now let's explain. Account-driven enrollment is initiated when a user selects the Sign in to work or school account option in the device's settings. This triggers the enrollment process by using managed Apple ID credentials, which then prompts the installation of the mobile device management profile and connects the device to Jamf Pro. On the other hand, enabling parental control has no connection to Jamf or device enrollment. It's simply used to manage child usage and restrictions on a device. Registering with Apple Business Manager is also not part of the end-user process. IT administrators handle this step prior to provisioning devices. Lastly, setting up screen time is entirely optional and not a requirement for MDM enrollment. It's designed for usage tracking and content restrictions, not for enterprise setup. So when a user is initiating Jamf enrollment on their own, Sign in to work or school account is the key menu item that starts that process. Which setting category helps a user back up data when switching to a new device? Select one answer. A. Erase all content and settings. B. Transfer or reset iPad. C. Face ID and passcode. D. About. Correct answer, B. Transfer or reset iPad. Now, the Transfer or Reset iPad section in the Settings app is designed to guide users through preparing their device for a transition. It includes tools for backing up data to iCloud and streamlining the setup process on a new iPad, ensuring a smooth handoff of apps, settings, and content. On the other hand, selecting Erase all content and settings would completely wipe the device, removing all personal data and configurations. That's useful when giving away or selling a device, but it doesn't help with backups. Next, the Face ID and passcode section is focused purely on security settings and biometric authentication. It doesn't offer any options related to backing up or transferring data. Finally, the About section gives you technical details like software version, serial number, and available storage, but has nothing to do with backing up or preparing a device for transfer. So when you're switching to a new device and want to safeguard your information, the correct place to go is Transfer or Reset iPad. What is the primary purpose of system integrity protection on macOS? Select one answer. A. To manage backup settings. B. To restrict the root user from modifying protected system areas. C. To enhance Wi-Fi performance. D. To enable faster boot times. Correct answer, B. To restrict the root user from modifying protected system areas. Now let's explain. System Integrity Protection, or SIP, is a security feature in macOS designed to prevent even the most privileged user accounts, including root, from making changes to critical system files and directories. This helps protect the integrity of the operating system and reduces the risk of malware or accidental damage. Managing backup settings, on the other hand, is completely unrelated to SIP. Backup preferences are handled through Time Machine or other backup tools, not system-level protection. Improving Wi-Fi performance is also outside the scope of SIP. Network speed and reliability depend on hardware, signal strength, and software optimizations, but not on SIP. Lastly, while SIP contributes to overall system stability, it doesn't directly affect boot times. Startup speed is determined more by hardware, login items, and the OS version. So the main role of SIP is security, specifically blocking even root-level changes to protected areas of macOS. Which macOS security feature ensures system files and kernel are shielded from user apps? Select one answer. A. Gatekeeper. B. File Vault. C. Runtime Protection. D. Time Machine. Correct answer. C. Runtime Protection. Now let's explain. Run Protection is a macOS security feature designed to block user applications from accessing sensitive areas like system files and kernel memory during execution. This helps prevent malicious or compromised software from modifying critical parts of the operating system. Gatekeeper, by contrast, focuses on verifying the identity and safety of applications before they are allowed to launch, but it does not protect system components while the app is running. File Vault is another important feature, but it deals with encrypting the contents of a Mac's disk, not live system protection. It secures stored data, not runtime access to memory or files. Time Machine serves an entirely different function. It's a backup tool used to restore files or the entire system from previous snapshots, but it doesn't shield kernel or system areas from apps. So when it comes to live protection of macOS internals from running applications, runtime protection is the correct and most effective defense mechanism. While managing shared devices, an admin observes that multiple APFS volumes are using different amounts of space, yet the total available space adjusts dynamically. What feature of APFS enables this? Select one answer. A. File duplication. B. Snapshot management. C. Space sharing. D. Partition resizing. Correct answer. Space sharing. Now let's explain. The APFS feature known as space sharing allows multiple volumes within a single APFS container to draw from a common pool of storage. This means that each volume can use what it needs without being limited by a fixed size, which provides flexibility and efficient use of available space. File duplication, on the other hand, actually increases storage usage instead of helping manage it dynamically, so it's not the right answer here. Snapshot management is used to capture the state of a volume at a given time, often for backup or rollback purposes. However, it doesn't influence how space is distributed between volumes. Partition resizing is more rigid. Traditional partitions must be manually resized and do not adapt automatically like volumes within APFS containers do. So when volumes adjust space usage based on demand, space sharing is the underlying APFS capability that makes this possible. A Mac in your environment is File Vault encrypted. The user is away and no one else can log in. What scenario could have caused this? Select one answer. A. Only the absent user is File Vault enabled. B. The File Vault profile was installed via self-service. C. An institutional recovery key was used. D. File Vault was enabled during pre-stage. Correct answer. A. Only the absent user is File Vault enabled. Now let's explain. If only one user was granted File Vault access during encryption, then only that user can unlock the disk during startup. This means if that user is unavailable, no one else can log in, because File Vault restricts disk access to authorized accounts. Installing the File Vault profile through self-service does not determine who can unlock the drive. It simply deploys the policy, but user access still has to be configured. Using an institutional recovery key can allow IT to decrypt the disk in recovery scenarios, but it doesn't substitute for a user login during normal startup. Enabling File Vault during pre-stage just automates encryption setup as part of deployment. It doesn't inherently limit user access unless only one user ends up enabled. So in this case, the issue arises because the absent user is the only one authorized by File Vault to unlock the Mac. A company needs to organize hundreds of scripts and packages within Jamf Pro. What should the administrator create to achieve this? Select one answer. A. Smart groups. B. Scripts folders. C. Categories. Policies. Correct answer. C. Categories. Let's explain. In Jamf Pro, categories are the built-in organizational tool that lets administrators group items like policies, scripts, packages, and printers. This makes it easier to sort and find resources, especially in environments with large inventories. Smart groups serve a different purpose. They're used to dynamically group devices based on specific criteria like operating system version or installed apps, but they don't organize scripts or packages. Scripts folders might sound useful, But Jamf Pro does not actually offer a folder structure specifically for organizing scripts. Everything is grouped by category instead. Policies, meanwhile, define actions such as installing software or applying settings, but they are not a means of organizing resources. So, when the goal is clean, scalable organization of scripts and packages, the best solution is to use categories. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. Apple Business Manager and Apple School Manager allow automatic device enrollment into Jamf Pro. True, restoring a device to factory settings removes its association with the organization. False, devices purchased from Apple authorized resellers can be linked to your MDM automatically. True, you must manually enroll all Apple devices into MDM even if using Apple Business Manager. False. Now let's explain. First, it is true that Apple Business Manager and Apple School Manager support automatic device enrollment. When linked with Jamf Pro, these services enable zero-touch deployment, automatically enrolling and supervising devices out of the box. Next, it is false that restoring a device removes its organizational association. Even after a factory reset, devices remain tied to the organization as long as they are assigned in Apple Business Manager, which helps maintain control and compliance. Furthermore, it is true that devices purchased from Apple authorized resellers can be automatically added to your MDM server, provided those resellers are connected to your Apple deployment portal. This simplifies inventory tracking and enrollment. Lastly, it is false to say that manual enrollment is required for all devices with Apple Business Manager. One of the primary benefits of ABM is the elimination of manual steps, enabling automated and scalable MDM enrollment. Each of these statements highlights how Apple's deployment tools streamline device management in educational and business environments. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. Jamf Pro uses Apple's MDM framework to deploy apps, enforce security, and manage Apple devices remotely. True, Jamf Pro sends configuration profiles directly to devices without using Apple Push Notification Service, APNs. False, devices must be turned on and connected to the internet to receive MDM commands via APNs. True, declarative device management requires administrators to manually configure device-side settings. False. Now let's explain. First, it is true that Jamf Pro relies on Apple's MDM framework to deliver remote management features. This includes deploying apps, enforcing security settings, and maintaining oversight of Apple devices across the network. Next, it is false that Jamf Pro sends configuration profiles directly without using APNs. APNs is essential because it acts as a trigger to notify devices that new instructions or profiles are ready. Without APNs, devices wouldn't know to check in for updates. It is also true that devices must be both turned on and connected to the internet to receive MDM commands. If either condition isn't met, commands will be delayed until the device is back online and reachable. Lastly, the statement about declarative device management is false. This newer method is designed to reduce manual configuration. It allows devices to self-manage certain behaviors by responding to a defined set of rules and conditions, freeing administrators from having to make every change manually. Each of these concepts is central to understanding how Jamf Pro and Apple's MDM ecosystem work together to streamline and automate device management. A technician needs to remotely reset the password for a local account on a macOS 10 and 14 computer using Jamf Pro. However, they encounter an error during execution. What is the most likely reason the reset failed? Select one answer. A. The account is currently logged in. B. The secure token is not disabled for the account. C. The password hint is not specified. D. The computer is not bound to Active Directory. Correct answer. B. The secure token is not disabled for the account. Now let's explain. On macOS 10.14 and later, secure tokens play a critical role in user account management. For a password reset to be executed remotely via Jamf Pro, the secure token must be disabled for that account. If it remains active and Jamf doesn't have permission to manage it, the reset process will fail. The account being logged in does not typically block a password reset unless secure token issues are involved, so that's not the primary cause. Password hints are entirely optional in macOS and are not required to perform a reset. Their absence will not generate a reset failure. Finally, binding to Active Directory is not necessary for managing local accounts with Jamf Pro. Jamf's MDM features operate independently of AD when managing local users. So the most likely and technically valid cause for the error is that the secure token is not disabled for the account in question. An administrator is troubleshooting a macOS device and needs to find where user documents and personal apps are stored. Where should they navigate? Select one answer. A. Applications Directory. B. System Directory. C. Data Volume. D. System Volume. Correct answer, C. Data Volume. Now let's explain. The data volume is where macOS stores user-specific content, such as documents, downloads, personal applications, and organizational data. It's separated from system files to maintain security and integrity, especially during system updates or repairs. The Applications Directory, by contrast, stores apps that are shared system-wide, not specific user data. It's visible to all users but isn't meant for storing personal files. The System Directory contains the core operating system components, which are critical for the functioning of macOS. It does not hold any user-generated content. Similarly, the system volume houses protected files and default applications necessary for macOS to boot and operate securely. User files are intentionally kept off this volume for security and stability. So for locating user documents and apps, the correct place to look is the data volume. An admin deletes an application from a user's Mac, but when it is reinstalled, all preferences are restored. What explains this behavior? Select one answer. A. The app's preferences were stored in the user's library and not deleted. B. macOS downloads preferences from iCloud. C. Jamf Pro automatically restores app preferences after deletion. D. The app cache stored preferences in the trash. Correct answer. A. The app's preferences were stored in the user's library and not deleted. Now let's explain. When an application is deleted from a Mac, its associated user preferences are often left behind in the library directory under the user's profile. These preferences are typically stored in property list files, and unless manually removed, they remain intact. As a result, reinstalling the app will automatically pick up these existing preference files, making it appear as though nothing changed. Meanwhile, macOS does not automatically retrieve app preferences from iCloud unless the app was specifically designed to sync them. Most apps store preferences locally, not in the cloud. Jamf Pro, although capable of deploying and managing settings, does not automatically restore preferences simply because an app is reinstalled. Lastly, the trash does not retain app preferences. Cache data is temporary and isn't meant to preserve persistent settings or configurations. So the most logical reason the preferences came back after reinstalling the app is that they were never deleted and remained in the user's library. A school IT administrator needs to enroll several macOS 14 computers into Jamf Pro without using a browser. The administrator also wants users to access allowed iCloud services using their managed Apple accounts after enrollment. What method should the administrator use for this workflow? Select one answer. A. Account-driven device enrollment. B. Profile-driven device enrollment. C. Automated device enrollment. D. Quick add package enrollment. Correct answer. A. Account-driven device enrollment. Now let's explain. Account-driven device enrollment is specifically designed for macOS 14 and later, enabling users to initiate enrollment directly from system settings without needing a browser. After signing in with their managed Apple account, users gain access to supervised management and any iCloud services that are allowed by the organization. Profile-driven device enrollment, on the other hand, requires visiting a web portal to install the enrollment profile. It lacks the seamless sign-in experience and iCloud integration offered by account-driven workflows. Automated device enrollment is powerful, but it's meant for devices that are pre-assigned in Apple Business or School Manager and doesn't apply to this scenario where the user initiates enrollment. Quick Add Package enrollment is outdated and largely deprecated. It no longer fits into modern Apple deployment strategies and lacks support for features like managed Apple accounts. So when enrollment must be browser-free and iCloud-enabled, account-driven device enrollment is the best fit. An IT admin creates a user-level configuration profile for Wi-Fi settings and deploys it to a group of MacBooks. A user reports not seeing the expected settings applied. What should the admin advise the user to do next? Select one answer. A. Restart self-service. B. Restart the computer or log out and back in. C. Clear Safari cache. D. Delete and reinstall the configuration profile. Correct answer. B. Restart the computer or log out and back in. Now let's explain. User-level configuration profiles often require the user's session to restart before the settings fully apply. This means logging out and back in, or simply rebooting the device, ensures the profile attaches properly to the active user. It's especially important when profiles are linked to MDM-enabled users, where login context affects profile activation. Restarting self-service will not apply the configuration. Self-service is a portal for accessing apps and tasks, but does not refresh configuration profiles. Clearing the Safari cache affects only web browsing data and has no impact on system-level settings or user configuration profiles. Deleting and reinstalling the configuration profile may seem like a fix, but it's unnecessary unless the profile itself is faulty. If the issue is just delayed activation, a logout or reboot is all that's needed. So the most effective next step is to restart the computer or log out and back in to trigger the user-level profile settings. What are two actions you can achieve by integrating Jamf Pro with an SMTP server? Select two answers. A. Send user-initiated enrollment invitations via email. B. Allow users to reset their passwords without admin intervention. C. Send mass emails to end users. D. Enable API token authentication. Correct answers. A. Send user-initiated enrollment invitations via email. C. Send mass emails to end users. Now let's explain. When Jamf Pro is connected to an SMTP server, it gains the ability to send emails for workflows like device enrollment and communication. First, SMTP enables Jamf Pro to automatically send user-initiated enrollment invitations. This is useful when users are prompted to enroll their devices and need instructions or links delivered to their inboxes. Additionally, SMTP allows administrators to send mass emails to groups of users. For instance, IT admins might notify students about software updates or remind staff to complete a compliance check, all from within the Jamf Pro console. However, SMTP does not handle password resets directly. While it may be used to deliver password reset links, the ability to reset passwords without admin action is tied to broader password management policies and user roles. Lastly, enabling API token authentication is unrelated to SMTP. API tokens are about securing API client access, not sending emails. So SMTP integration supports communication and enrollment invitations, making options A and C the correct answers. An IT team configures Macs to hide certain setup assistant panes such as Appearance, iCloud, and Siri. Later, they discover users are still enabling these features after setup. What should they have done differently? Select one answer. A. Apply permanent restrictions through MDM for each skipped feature. B. Use Apple Configurator to disable Setup Assistant. C. Reset the Mac after each configuration change. D. Skip fewer Setup Assistant panes. Correct answer. A. Apply permanent restrictions through MDM for each skipped feature. Now let's explain. Skipping Setup Assistant panes only hides them during initial setup. It doesn't prevent users from enabling the features later. To ensure those features remain disabled, administrators must apply MDM restrictions after setup. These restrictions enforce behavior across device usage, not just during onboarding. Using Apple Configurator might help configure or supervise devices, but it does not establish permanent restrictions tied to individual features like Siri or iCloud. Resetting the Mac won't solve the issue either. A reboot doesn't remove user access or block functionality if the restriction isn't in place. Likewise, skipping fewer panes would still leave features available post-setup. The issue isn't how many panes are skipped, but rather the lack of enforcement through configuration profiles. So, the best solution is to pair skipped panes with permanent MDM restrictions for each skipped feature. During profile-driven device enrollment, what must users download and install to complete the enrollment process? Select one answer. A. Self-service app. B. Jamf Pro binary. C. MDM profile. D. Certificate authority file. Correct answer, C. MDM profile. Now let's explain. When using profile-driven enrollment, users are required to download and install the MDM profile. This is the core element that allows the device to establish management under Jamf Pro and achieve user-approved MDM status. Without installing the MDM profile, the device won't be recognized as managed. The self-service app, while useful post-enrollment, is not part of the required steps to complete the enrollment process. It can be pushed later as part of policy deployment. The Jamf Pro binary is installed behind the scenes during enrollment. Users do not manually interact with it, making it irrelevant to the user-facing step. The certificate authority file might be involved in other contexts, but is not necessary to complete this enrollment method. It's not something the user is prompted to download directly during standard MDM setup. So in summary, installing the MDM profile is the key action that finalizes profile-driven enrollment. What happens when you select Distribute to All after editing a configuration profile? Select one answer. A. Only new devices receive the edited version. B. The profile is disabled. C. All devices in scope reinstall the updated profile. D. The previous profile remains unchanged. Correct answer. C. All devices in scope reinstall the updated profile. Now let's explain. When you choose Distribute to All in Jamf Pro after making changes to a configuration profile, it triggers all devices that are currently in the profile scope to remove the old version and reinstall the updated one. This ensures that every applicable device has the latest settings enforced without waiting for any new assignment. Conversely, selecting Distribute to newly assigned devices only would limit the updated profile to just new devices added to the scope, not existing ones. That's what makes option A incorrect. Option B is also not valid because the action doesn't disable the profile. It simply replaces the existing version with the updated one. Lastly, option D is false because the previous profile does not remain unchanged. It's actively replaced on all scope devices. So remember, Distribute to All ensures that every currently scoped device gets the updated configuration immediately. What must be done before changing the MDM-enabled user on a Mac with an unremovable MDM profile? Select one answer. A. Send the remove MDM profile command. B. Enable file vault. C. Reset SMC and NVRAM. D. Uninstall self-service. Correct answer. A. Send the remove MDM profile command. Now let's explain. Before changing the MDM-enabled user on a Mac that has an unremovable MDM profile, the administrator must first send the remove MDM profile command. This is because profiles marked as unremovable require this specific command from the MDM server to be cleared, allowing re-enrollment or reassignment of MDM authority. On the other hand, enabling file vault is unrelated to this process. It affects disk encryption, not profile management. Likewise, resetting the SMC or NVRAM is a hardware-level procedure that won't influence software-level MDM profile bindings. Lastly, uninstalling the self-service app has no bearing on the MDM status or user configuration. It's simply a tool interface for user-accessible features, not profile control. So, to change the MDM-enabled user properly, always begin by issuing the remove MDM profile command from Jamf Pro. What does SAML-based SSO in Jamf Pro primarily enable for end users? Select one answer. A. Access to Jamf platform services. B. Streamlined enrollment and self-service login. C. Access to Jamf account services. D. Jamf Pro API authentication. Correct answer B. Streamlined enrollment and self-service login. Now let's explain. SAML-based single sign-on SSO in Jamf Pro is mainly intended to simplify the login experience for end users during user-initiated enrollment and when accessing self-service. With SAML enabled, users can authenticate using their existing identity provider credentials, reducing friction and improving security. Conversely, access to broader Jamf platform services is typically managed using OpenID Connect, OIDC, not SAML. Similarly, Jamf account services also rely on OIDC-based authentication rather than SAML protocols. Finally, API authentication in Jamf Pro is handled through roles and tokens and does not involve SAML at all. Therefore, the core benefit of SAML-based SSO for end users is streamlined enrollment and seamless self-service login. What is the maximum number of serial numbers you can paste from a text file into Apple School Manager for device assignment at one time? Select one answer. A. 5 and 12, B. 1024, C. 2048, D. Unlimited. Correct answer, B. 1724. Now let's explain. Apple School Manager sets a limit of 1 to 24 serial numbers that can be pasted from a text file in one go for batch device assignments. This threshold is designed to balance efficiency and system stability, especially during mass onboarding of Apple devices. By contrast, pasting only 512 serial numbers falls below this optimal limit, thereby reducing batch efficiency. On the other hand, attempting to submit 2048 serial numbers exceeds the allowed maximum and may cause processing errors. Furthermore, there is no support for unlimited pasting. Apple imposes a defined limit specifically to maintain performance and prevent data processing bottlenecks. So the best practice is to stay within the 1024 serial number limit to ensure a smooth and reliable batch assignment experience in Apple School Manager. Your healthcare organization has Apple TVs and Macs in use. You want a complete list of all available MDM settings applicable to each OS version and hardware type. Where should you look? Select one answer. A. Apple Configurator User Guide. B. Apple Platform Deployment MDM Settings section. C. App Store Purchase History. D. Jamf Remote Assist log files. Correct answer. B. Apple Platform Deployment MDM Settings section. Now let's explain. The Apple Platform Deployment Guide, specifically the MDM Settings section, provides a comprehensive list of all supported MDM payloads, restrictions, and configuration options for each Apple operating system and hardware type. This makes it the go-to resource for understanding which features are configurable via MDM across devices like Macs, iPads, and Apple TVs. In contrast, the Apple Configurator User Guide is primarily focused on manual setup workflows and device supervision, but it does not serve as a central repository for MDM capabilities. Similarly, App Store Purchase History offers insight into app transactions, which is irrelevant for managing device settings. Additionally, Jamf Remote Assist log files are valuable for troubleshooting session-specific issues, but not for long-term MDM configuration planning. So if you're looking to standardize or review MDM controls across different device types, the most accurate and centralized source is the Apple Platform Deployment MDM Settings section. Which condition causes Jamf Pro to prevent configuration of a new software title? Select one answer. A. A user previously deferred the update. B. The title already exists in Jamf Pro or a site. C. The title is not included in the self-service catalog. D. The title has not yet been added to the dashboard. Correct answer. B. The title already exists in Jamf Pro or a site. Now let's explain. In Jamf Pro, each software title can only be configured once per Jamf Pro instance or site. So if an admin tries to configure a software title that already exists, Jamf Pro blocks the action to prevent duplicate configurations. This avoids confusion and ensures consistent management across the environment. On the other hand, if a user had previously deferred the update, it doesn't affect the ability to configure the software title. Deferral is a user-level action and does not interfere with administrative setup. Additionally, the title's inclusion in the self-service catalog is optional and managed by the administrator. Its absence from the catalog doesn't prevent configuration, it simply limits visibility to end users. Lastly, the dashboard is meant for monitoring, not for enforcing or blocking configuration changes. Whether a title appears there has no impact on its ability to be set up. So remember, Jamf Pro will stop you only if the title has already been set up in the system or a specific site. When does user-related data from an inventory preload CSV upload apply in Jamf Pro? Select one answer. A. After the next inventory collection. B. Immediately after the CSV is uploaded. C. During device enrollment only. D. After the device restarts. Correct answer. B. Immediately after the CSV is uploaded. Now let's explain. As soon as the CSV file is uploaded through inventory preload in Jamf Pro, any user-related data such as username, full name, and email address is instantly applied to the associated devices. This allows for seamless identification and tracking without waiting for further processes. In contrast, waiting for the next inventory collection only updates hardware-related data and won't trigger the application of preload values. Moreover, device enrollment isn't a prerequisite for this data to take effect. The CSV upload alone is sufficient to map user details. Also, restarting the device doesn't influence user assignment or data application. Jamf Pro doesn't rely on reboots to apply CSV information. So, once the preload CSV is submitted, the user data is live and ready for use in Jamf Pro immediately. Which mass action requires an Apple GSX connection to function properly? Select one answer. A. Send mass emails to users. B. Look up and populate purchasing information. C. delete computers from Jamf Pro. D, send remote wipe commands. Correct answer, B, look up and populate purchasing information. Now let's explain. GSX, or Global Service Exchange, is Apple's service platform that allows Jamf Pro to retrieve purchasing and warranty information for Apple devices. When you choose the action to look up and populate purchasing information, Jamf Pro uses GSX credentials to fetch those details directly from Apple's backend. On the other hand, sending mass emails to users relies on SMTP settings, not GSX. Deleting computers from Jamf Pro is a local action that doesn't require external service integration. And finally, sending remote wipe commands is part of MDM command infrastructure, which is independent of GSX. Therefore, if your goal is to retrieve purchasing information in bulk for devices, GSX integration is essential. Which two items are required to generate a push certificate? Select two answers. A, valid Apple account. B, MDM profile. C, Jamf ID. D, Jamf parent app. E, Apple device enrollment program. Correct answers. A, valid Apple account. C, Jamf ID. Now let's explain. To generate a push certificate for Jamf Pro, two critical elements are needed: a valid Apple account and a Jamf ID. The Apple account is necessary to access Apple's push certificates portal, where the certificate is ultimately signed and issued. Meanwhile, the Jamf ID is used to authenticate within Jamf Pro to generate the certificate signing request, or CSR, that begins the process. In contrast, the MDM profile is something applied later in the device lifecycle, after the push certificate has already been established and trusted. The Jamf parent app is unrelated entirely, as it is a standalone application designed to help parents manage student devices. And while the Apple device enrollment program does automate the enrollment process, it is not involved in the generation of the push certificate. Therefore, the only two essentials for initiating and completing the push certificate setup are a valid Apple account and a Jamf ID. Which of the following statements are true about user-initiated enrollment? Select two answers. A, supervision is not enabled during this type of enrollment. B, users can remove the MDM profile at any time. C, devices must be purchased through Apple Business Manager. D, the method only works before Setup Assistant is completed. Correct answers. A, supervision is not enabled during this type of enrollment. B, users can remove the MDM profile at any time. Now let's explain. With user-initiated enrollment, users manually enroll their own devices into Jamf Pro, typically through a web portal. As a result, supervision is not enabled. Supervision is only available through automated methods like automated device enrollment. Additionally, since the enrollment is user-driven and not enforced by Apple Business Manager, users can remove the MDM profile at any time. This means the organization has limited control over the device, as the user maintains ownership and permissions. On the other hand, devices do not need to be purchased through Apple Business Manager for this method to work, making that option incorrect. Lastly, the method does not rely on Setup Assistant and occurs after the setup is complete, so the statement that it works only before Setup Assistant is completed is also false. So to summarize, user-initiated enrollment lacks supervision and allows the user to remove the MDM profile whenever they choose. Which setting ensures Jamf Pro only downloads patch titles signed by a trusted source? Select one answer. A, use SSL. B, enable automatic retry. C, validate software title definitions. D, patch reporting enablement. Correct answer, C, validate software title definitions. Now let's explain. When it comes to securing software updates in Jamf Pro, the option Validate Software Title Definitions plays a critical role. This setting ensures that only patch titles signed by trusted sources are downloaded, which protects against compromised or unauthenticated content being deployed. On the other hand, using SSL does encrypt data during transmission, but it doesn't confirm the authenticity of the actual patch file itself. Likewise, enabling automatic retry applies only to policy execution attempts, not patch verification. Lastly, patch reporting enablement is not a real setting in Jamf Pro and doesn't contribute to update security. So if you're looking to maintain integrity and trust in your update process, enabling validation of software title definitions is the correct and secure approach. Why is it important not to use the same username for managed local admin accounts in both user-initiated and pre-stage enrollment? Select one answer. A, it can lock users out of self-service. B, it may prevent the account from being assigned secure token. C, it causes password expiration warnings. D, it may result in account creation failures and lapse API issues. Correct answer? D, it may result in account creation failures and lapse API issues. Now let's explain. Using the same username for managed local admin accounts across both pre-stage and user-initiated enrollment workflows can lead to account creation conflicts, especially during deployment. This can cause failures when creating accounts or issues with the local administrator password solution lapse API, which depends on unique identifiers to manage and rotate passwords securely. In contrast, self-service access is not affected by admin account naming conflicts, so option A is irrelevant to this issue. Next, secure token assignment is determined by factors like the order in which accounts are created and their roles, not the duplication of usernames, so option B doesn't address the core problem. As for password expiration warnings, Jamf Pro doesn't issue them automatically, making option C incorrect. Ultimately, avoiding duplicate usernames ensures successful admin account creation and reliable interaction with the Lapse API during enrollment. You receive a request to clear the screen time passcode on a student's iPad, but the clear screen time passcode command is unavailable. What's the most likely reason? Select one answer. A, the iPad is not supervised. B, the iPad is running iOS 17. C, the passcode was not set using Jamf Pro. D, the command can only be sent via mass action. Correct answer. A, the iPad is not supervised. Now let's explain. In Jamf Pro, the ability to clear the screen time passcode is strictly tied to whether the device is supervised. Supervision grants administrators deeper control over iOS devices, which includes sensitive actions like removing screen time restrictions. If a device is unsupervised, this command will simply be unavailable. Although iOS 17 supports this command, that alone doesn't enable it. Supervision is still required, making option B incorrect. Option C is also misleading. Even if the screen time passcode wasn't originally set using Jamf Pro, that doesn't impact whether the command is available. Lastly, the command is not a mass action, so option D doesn't apply. It can only be executed on individually supervised devices, so in summary, if the command is missing, it's most likely because the iPad isn't supervised. Your team is responsible for converting the Apple-issued certificate to a .p12 file before uploading it into Jamf Pro. Which step must be completed first to achieve this successfully? Select one answer. A, encrypt the certificate with Jamf API token. B, generate the CSR using OpenSSL. C, obtain a private key and Apple certificate in PEM format. D, apply for a GSX account from AppleCare Plus. Correct answer. C, obtain a private key and Apple certificate in .pem format. Now let's explain. To successfully convert an Apple-issued certificate to a P12 file for use in Jamf Pro, the process begins with obtaining the private key and Apple certificate in .pem format. These two components are necessary to construct a valid P12 file, which bundles both the certificate and private key for secure communication. In contrast, encrypting with a Jamf API token is unrelated to certificate handling. It's used in secure API communications, not certificate packaging. Next, generating the CSR using OpenSSL is not part of Apple's recommended process. Apple typically requires the CSR to be generated via its My Access portal or another official channel with precise parameters. Lastly, applying for a GSX account from AppleCare Plus has no role in creating or converting certificates. GSX is used for service lookup and warranty data, not certificate management. So starting with the private key and certificate in PEM format is essential to move forward with P12 file creation. A Jamf Pro user needs to retrieve every item from the inventory regardless of filters or keywords. What is the correct method? Select one answer. A, leave the search field blank or enter search. B, click all computers. C, use advanced search only. D, filter by building name. Correct answer. A, leave the search field blank or enter short. Now let's explain. When a Jamf Pro user needs to retrieve all items from the inventory without narrowing by filters or specific keywords, the quickest and most effective method is to leave the search field blank or enter an asterisk. Shh. This wildcard search tells the system to return all results in the database, essentially acting as a show everything command. In contrast, clicking all computers is not a real UI feature in Jamf Pro and thus not a valid option. Using advanced search only is unnecessary here, since this task doesn't require complex filtering or logic, just a full list. Likewise, filtering by building name narrows the results and won't help retrieve the entire inventory. So the correct and most efficient method is to leave the search field blank or enter star. An admin is viewing a computer's inventory record in Jamf Pro and notices the Bluetooth Low Energy Capability field says unknown. What could be the cause? Select one answer. A. Self-service has never been launched on the device. B. The Bluetooth module is damaged. C. The user has disabled Bluetooth. D. The device was not enrolled via pre-stage. Correct answer. A. Self-service has never been launched on the device. Now let's explain. Jamf Pro relies on the self-service app to gather certain hardware-specific data, including Bluetooth Low Energy (BLE) capability. If self-service has never been launched on the device, it cannot report this information back to Jamf, and the BLE field remains marked as unknown. By contrast, a damaged Bluetooth module would not prevent BLE data from being reported unless verified by a hardware check, something Jamf Pro does not perform. Disabling Bluetooth also doesn't affect BLE capability reporting. BLE status refers to the device's capability, not its current setting. Finally, whether or not a device was enrolled via pre-stage doesn't influence the BLE capability reporting. Therefore, if BLE says unknown, the likely cause is that self-service has never been launched on the device. A technician wants to delete computers in bulk that are no longer in use. Which Jamf Pro feature supports this task efficiently? Select one answer. Use remote commands to reset the device. B. Export the device list and remove them via spreadsheet. C. Mass delete from a smart group or search result. D. Deactivate the devices from Apple School Manager. Correct answer. C. Mass delete from a smart group or search result. Now let's explain. When a technician needs to remove multiple outdated or unused devices from Jamf Pro efficiently, the best method is to mass delete from a smart group or search result. This feature allows admins to select multiple entries based on a filter or group and delete them all at once, saving time and ensuring consistency. Although resetting a device using remote commands is useful for wiping data, it does not remove the device record from Jamf Pro. It only resets the device contents. Similarly, exporting the device list is helpful for reporting or documentation, but it won't remove devices from Jamf. It's a read-only action. Lastly, deactivating devices from Apple School Manager only affects their status in ABM, Apple Business Manager, not their presence in Jamf Pro. So, to clear out old inventory in Jamf Pro efficiently, the correct approach is to mass delete directly from a smart group or search result. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. In Jamf Pro, scope is made up of targets, limitations, and exclusions. True, an exclusion can override both a target and a limitation. True limitations are a required part of every scope. False scope functions differently for computers and mobile devices. False spell. Now let's explain. First, it's true that in Jamf Pro, the scope consists of three parts: targets, limitations, and exclusions. Targets define which devices should receive a configuration. Limitations restrict it to specific conditions like network or OS version, and exclusions remove specific devices or groups from the scope, even if they match the target. Second, exclusions override both targets and limitations. That means if a device is included in both the target and the exclusion list, it will be excluded, regardless of any limitations applied. Third, it's false that limitations are required. In Jamf Pro, only a target is necessary to define a scope. Limitations and exclusions are entirely optional and used for fine-tuning. Lastly, scope functions the same way for both computers and mobile devices. The underlying structure, targets, limitations, and exclusions, applies consistently across device types. So in summary, the correct responses are true, true, false, and false. What happens when mobile devices are assigned to a site using a mass action? Select one answer. A. Their assigned users are also added to that site. B. The devices are converted to static group members. C. Remote commands are automatically sent. D. GSX information is reset. Correct answer. A. Their assigned users are also added to that site. Now let's explain. When mobile devices are assigned to a site through a mass action in Jamf Pro, any users already linked to those devices are also automatically added to that site. This ensures consistency in administrative boundaries and keeps user associations intact as devices move between organizational units. On the other hand, the idea that devices are converted to static group members is incorrect. Group membership, especially in static or smart groups, is a separate concept and unaffected by site assignment. Additionally, remote commands are not sent automatically during site assignment. Any commands such as wipe or lock must be manually triggered. Finally, GSX information is not reset during site assignment. GSX data, which relates to device purchase and warranty status, remains unchanged regardless of the device's site. So in summary, assigning a device to a site via mass action also brings its user along to the same site. What action updates Smart Group membership in Jamf Pro? Select one answer. A. Manual refresh by the admin. B. Devices submitting inventory or checking in. C. Devices rebooting. D. Devices syncing with Apple Business Manager. Correct answer, B. Devices submitting inventory or checking in. Now let's explain. Smart Group membership in Jamf Pro is dynamic and updates automatically when a device checks in or submits inventory. This means that whenever a device communicates with the Jamf server, it provides its current status, and if that status meets or fails to meet the group's criteria, manual intervention. Group evaluation, as reboots do not involve submitting new data to the server. And while syncing with Apple Business Manager is important for enrollment and assignment works, it has no bearing on Smart Group membership, since that feature depends solely on device-reported data. So the key takeaway is Smart Groups update when the device checks in or submits inventory, automatically and without admin effort. An admin wants to apply a restriction profile and ensure it displays the organization's name. What method ensures this while keeping it trusted by devices? Select one answer. A. Sign the configuration profile with a third-party certificate. B. Manually edit the .mobile config file before upload. C. Use Jamf Pro's built-in certificate authority to sign the profile. D. Use an unsigned profile and enable push notifications. Correct answer. C. Use Jamf Pro's built-in certificate authority to sign the profile. Now let's explain. When a configuration profile is signed using Jamf Pro's built-in certificate authority, it automatically carries a trusted signature that matches the organization's name. This not only guarantees authenticity, but also reassures users that the profile is from a recognized and secure source. On the other hand, using a third-party certificate may not display the organization's name unless it's specifically configured to reflect that branding, which adds complexity and risk of inconsistency. Similarly, manually editing the .mobile config file doesn't provide any verification or trust guarantees. Devices won't trust the profile unless it's properly signed, and using an unsigned profile, even with push notifications enabled, will result in the profile appearing as untrusted, and it will lack the branding that helps reassure end users of its source. So for a secure, trusted, and brand-consistent deployment, the best and most efficient method is using Jamf Pro's built-in signing authority. An IT admin is preparing to upgrade all Mac computers in the organization to the latest macOS version. They want to reduce vulnerability exposure and take advantage of the latest management features. What should be the recommended initial step before targeting all machines? Select one answer. A. Test the upgrade using full installer applications on legacy Macs. B. Deploy the upgrade using third-party tools across all devices simultaneously. C. Test the upgrade workflows on a small set of computers. D. Send a force upgrade command using Apple Configurator. Correct answer, C. Test the upgrade workflows on a small set of computers. Now let's explain. Before launching a major upgrade across an entire organization, it's essential to first test the process on a small group of devices. This helps IT teams identify potential compatibility issues, performance impacts, or workflow interruptions that might affect users. It ensures that when the upgrade is rolled out organization-wide, it goes smoothly and with minimal disruption. By contrast, using full installer applications on legacy Macs doesn't accurately reflect the performance or behavior of the upgrade on modern hardware, limiting its effectiveness as a test. deploying upgrades with third-party tools across all devices simultaneously is risky, as it bypasses Jamf Pro's native upgrade controls and doesn't allow for phased rollout or issue resolution. Finally, Apple Configurator is intended for specific device setup tasks and is not designed for enterprise-wide upgrade deployment, making it an inefficient and unsuitable method for this use case. So the best approach is to start small, validate everything, and then scale up with confidence. What is the searchable attribute under application usage? Select one answer. A, application name, B, usage time, C, install date, D, last opened. Correct answer, A. Now let's explain. In Jamf Pro, when you're working within the application usage section, only the application name is searchable using the simple search feature. This allows admins to quickly locate data related to specific apps that have been launched on devices. On the other hand, usage time, install date, and last opened are informational fields used primarily in reporting. These values are collected and stored, but they are not part of the searchable fields in basic searches. For example, even though you might want to filter devices based on how recently an app was used or installed, you'd need to build a report rather than rely on simple search functionality. So if you're trying to search for application usage, application name is your go-to field. Which of the following can be used as targets when configuring scope in Jamf Pro? Select two answers. A, computer groups, B, personal mobile devices, C, buildings, D, time machine backups. Correct answers. A, computer groups, C, buildings. Now let's explain. When configuring scope in Jamf Pro, you're essentially defining who or what should receive a policy, profile, or app. Two of the valid target types are computer groups. These are smart or static groups of devices you manage within Jamf Pro. Assigning scope to a group ensures that all members receive the intended configuration or command. Buildings. Jamf Pro lets you organize devices by physical locations like buildings. You can target all devices located in a specific building, which is helpful for geographically segmented deployments. On the other hand, personal mobile devices are not eligible targets because Jamf Pro does not support scoping based on personally owned BYOD devices. Similarly, time machine backups have no relationship to scope settings. They're not managed objects in Jamf Pro's context of configuration targeting. So if you're setting up scope and looking for valid targets, think in terms of organizational structures like groups and locations, not personal assets or backup files. Which requirement must be met to allow Jamf Pro to install App Store apps automatically on macOS? Select one answer. A, enable certificate-based authentication and push notifications. B, install the app manually from the App Store first. C, ensure Apple IDs are signed in on all devices. D, run the command line interface in terminal. Correct answer. A, enable certificate-based authentication and push notifications. Now let's explain. To automatically install App Store apps on macOS through Jamf Pro, certificate-based authentication and push notifications must be enabled. These two settings establish trust and allow Jamf Pro to securely communicate with and manage devices through Apple's MDM protocol. In contrast, manually installing apps from the App Store bypasses Jamf Pro entirely, making it irrelevant to automated deployment. Also, Apple IDs are not necessary when the installation is device assigned, which is the typical method used in education or enterprise environments. Lastly, while terminal can be powerful for scripting and troubleshooting, it is not needed for automatic installations through Jamf's MDM. So for automated app deployment via Jamf, it all begins with trusted, secure communication. Hence, enabling certificate-based authentication and push notifications is essential. Where in Jamf Pro can you find the Managed Software Updates interface? Select one answer. A, in the Security Settings section. B, in the Computers or Devices section under Content Management. C, in the Global Management settings. D, under Extension Attributes. Correct answer, B, in the Computers or Devices section under Content Management. Now let's explain. The Managed Software Updates interface is located in Content Management within the Computers or Devices section of Jamf Pro. This is the dedicated area for configuring, deploying, and monitoring OS and software update plans targeted at managed Apple devices. On the other hand, Security settings are focused on policies like encryption and password requirements. They don't deal with updates. Similarly, the global management settings affect broader system-wide behavior but don't directly handle update workflows. Lastly, extension attributes are custom data points used to gather unique information from devices. They are not part of update management. Therefore, to manage software updates effectively, you'll always navigate to Content Management under the Computers or Devices section in Jamf Pro. You want to view the full inventory details for a computer after performing a simple search by user email. What must you do to access the computer's record? Select one answer. A. Scroll to the bottom of the list. B. Click the Reports tab. C. Click Expand next to the search result. D. Open the dashboard. Correct answer C. Click Expand next to the search result. Now let's explain. When you perform a search in Jamf Pro using a user's email address, the system may return a user-based result rather than a direct computer listing. In such cases, simply clicking on the search result won't show the computer inventory right away. Instead, clicking Expand next to the search result is the key action. This allows you to drill into associated records, such as linked computers, making the full inventory details accessible. On the other hand, scrolling to the bottom of the list won't help because Jamf Pro doesn't arrange linked data that way. Similarly, clicking the Reports tab provides general summaries, not full computer inventory. And the dashboard offers high-level data, not device-specific records. So, for a clear and accurate route to a device's full inventory, use the Expand button next to the search result. Which two variables can be used in a login window banner to display device-specific information? Select two answers. A. Serial number. B. Wi-Fi name. C. Computer name. D. User role. Correct answers. A. Serial number. C. Computer name. Now let's explain. In Jamf Pro, you can customize the login window banner using certain built-in variables to display real-time device-specific details. Among those, serial number is one such valid variable, which dynamically displays the device's serial number in the login window. Similarly, computer name is a supported variable that outputs the device's assigned name. This can be helpful for asset identification or user instructions at login. However, Wi-Fi name is not a recognized variable within the payload structure, so it won't be rendered or replaced in the banner. And user role is not a supported variable either. Jamf Pro doesn't recognize it as valid syntax for login window customization. Therefore, when creating a banner that shows hardware-specific data, only variables like serial number and computer name will work correctly. A technician wants to manually force a specific policy with ID 150 to run on a remote Mac. Which command should they use? Select one answer. A. Sudo jamf policy trigger 150. B. Sudo jamf run policy 150. C. Sudo jamf policy I50. D. Sudo jamf policy manual 150. Correct answer C. Sudo jamf policy ID 150. Now let's explain. When you want to run a Jamf policy using its specific numeric ID, the proper command syntax is sudo jamf policy-id policy ID. In this case, that becomes sudo jamf policy-id 150. This allows Jamf Pro to target and execute the exact policy identified by that number. On the other hand, using a trigger name like in option A, sudo jamf policy-trigger 150 only works if the policy was configured to run based on a named custom trigger, not an ID. Option B, sudo jamf run policy 150, is syntactically invalid. It's not recognized by the Jamf command line interface. Lastly, option D, sudo jamf policy manual 150, is not a supported Jamf CLI command either. There's no --manual flag in Jamf's policy execution syntax. So the correct method to target a specific policy by ID is to use the YD flag. What does enabling the user-approved MDM profile notification do in self-service? Select one answer. A. Notifies admins when MDM profiles are deleted. B. Prompts users to approve required profiles. C. Automatically signs configuration profiles. D. Triggers policy installation. Correct answer. B. Prompts users to approve required profiles. Now let's explain. Enabling the user-approved MDM profile notification within self-service is designed to assist users by reminding them to complete the MDM approval process. Specifically, it prompts users when their device requires them to approve a pending MDM profile, which is crucial for full management capabilities. In contrast, option A suggests it notifies admins when profiles are deleted But that's not a function of self-service. It's more of a system-level alert or log. Moving on to option C, automatic signing of configuration profiles doesn't happen through self-service. Profile signing is handled during creation, typically by the administrator. And finally, D mentions triggering policy installation, which is unrelated. Policy installations are governed by their own triggers and scopes and don't rely on this notification setting. So the correct role of this setting is to remind users to take action in approving their MDM profile, ensuring smoother device management enrollment. An IT department wants to automate device messaging during software installations and notify users via the notification center when updates occur. Select two answers: A, Jamf Helper, B, Jamf Management Action, C, Jamf Daemon, Jamf AAD. Correct answers: A, Jamf Helper, B, Jamf Management Action. Now let's explain. Jamf Helper is designed specifically to display messages to end users during system activities like installations, restarts, or other managed events. It allows administrators to customize the appearance and behavior of those messages, ensuring that users are properly informed during updates or actions initiated by Jamf Pro. Meanwhile, Jamf Management Action is another key component for user notifications. It posts policy-related messages directly to the notification center, making it ideal for alerting users about actions like updates or required approvals. On the other hand, Jamf Daemon operates in the background to execute administrative functions silently. It does not display messages to users. Likewise, Jamf AAD is used to facilitate integration between Jamf Pro and Microsoft Entra ID, formerly Azure AD, for identity and access management, but it plays no role in messaging users during updates. So, if your goal is to keep users informed during device changes or software installations, the correct tools to use are Jamf Helper and Jamf Management Action. For each statement below, indicate whether the answer is true or false. When a Mac enrolls in Jamf Pro, only an MDM profile is installed. False. The Jamf binary is a command line tool that performs many Jamf management tasks. True. You can access the Jamf binary by opening Terminal and typing jamf. True. The Terminal app is not pre-installed on Mac computers. False. Now let's explain. First, it's false that only an MDM profile is installed when a Mac enrolls in Jamf Pro. In reality, along with the MDM profile, additional components like the Jamf binary are installed to facilitate device management beyond just configuration profiles. Next, it is true that the Jamf binary is a command line tool used for executing a wide range of management tasks. IT admins rely on it for actions like triggering policies, gathering inventory, and more. Likewise, it is true that you can access the Jamf binary by launching the Terminal app and typing Jamf. This works just like using any other CLI tool on macOS. Lastly, the statement about Terminal not being pre-installed is false. Terminal is a native app that comes with macOS and is located in the Applications folder under Utilities. Understanding these facts is essential for effectively managing Macs through Jamf Pro and using the built-in tools macOS provides. You need to allow users to defer a scheduled software update installation via policy. Which tab in the policy configuration should you configure to enable this behavior? Select one answer. A, General, B, User Interaction, C, Scope, D, Self-Service. Correct answer, B, User Interaction. Now let's explain. To allow users for a scheduled update installation, you need to configure the deferral behavior within the User Interaction tab of the policy. This is where you define how users are notified and what their deferral options are, such as postponing the update by a certain number of hours or days. On the other hand, the General tab controls the policy trigger and frequency, not user-facing options. Scope only determines which devices or users the policy targets, and not how they interact with it. Lastly, the Self-Service tab governs whether the policy appears in the Self-Service app, but it does not affect deferral settings. So if your goal is to provide users with flexibility around update timing, the User Interaction tab is the place to set that up. What's the purpose of the Self-Service tab when configuring a policy? Select one answer. A, to allow users to manually trigger the policy. B, to define scope of the policy. C, to restrict policies to admin devices only. D, to add restart prompts. Correct answer, A, to allow users to manually trigger the policy. Now let's explain. The self-service tab is designed to make a policy available to users so they can manually run it from the self-service app. This empowers users to install software, run maintenance tasks, or trigger updates without waiting for automated triggers. In contrast, defining the scope of a policy is handled in the Scope tab, where you set which devices or users the policy will apply to. If you're trying to restrict access to admin devices, that's also managed through scoping rules, not through the Self-Service tab. And when it comes to adding restart prompts, those settings belong under the User Interaction tab, not Self-Service. So if your goal is to allow users to control when a policy runs, the Self-Service tab is exactly where you need to go. Which payload is used to install, uninstall, or cache software packages? Select one answer. A. Packages. B. Software updates. C. Maintenance. D. Files and processes. Correct answer. A. Packages. Now let's explain. The packages payload in Jamf Pro is specifically designed for handling software installation, uninstallation, and caching. It provides administrators the ability to deploy applications and system tools by delivering the actual package file to the device. On the other hand, the software updates payload is reserved for triggering Apple's built-in update mechanism, which does not involve custom or third-party packages. Meanwhile, the maintenance payload is used to install cached packages or perform system tasks like verifying disk permissions, but it doesn't initiate new package installations directly. Lastly, the files and processes payload is useful for tasks like running scripts, removing files, or killing processes, but it's not intended for managing software packages. So when your goal is to deliver, remove, or cache software for later deployment, packages is the payload to use.